There are almost 1,000 unidentified bodies in the UK.
The body was found floating on the sea.
Mysteries. People found with no identification.
Those people who have died and then remained unidentified after death, they have no voice.
Investigators at Locate International have files on these cold cases.
All the work that's been done so far has failed to find a name.
To try and solve them and put a name and a story to the bodies.
It's a bit like a whodunit, isn't it?
A team of top scientists and experts use cutting-edge forensics to reinvestigate seemingly unsolvable cases.
Any cases where unidentified remains are found, which include clothing or textiles, I could be brought in to do analysis.
To me, that would be a kind of blunt force trauma.
You can find out so much more about an individual through science, which may help identify them.
Because for each unidentified body, there's a family whose loved one has disappeared without trace.
Just to know that there's a place where he is. And at the moment, we don't know where he is.
I can get to say my goodbyes to my dad.
On the 30th of August 1984, 26-year-old George Johnstone went missing off the Norfolk coast. Head of Locate International, Dave Grimstead, has come to meet George's brother-in-law, Barry Trussell.
Barry.
Dave,
Good
nice
to
to
meet
meet you.
Who's never given up trying to find out what happened. Almost 40 years ago, Barry came here to Hopton Beach on a family holiday.
Tell me about what you were doing on that day.
It was a beautiful sunny day like today, but a very windy day. George came to see us in the morning and said they were going to go down to the beach. I'd already made plans and said, I'll maybe see you later, but I'm going round the pool.
George headed to the beach with his wife and 2-year-old daughter, Lucy.
Unfortunately, I saw a helicopter go over in the sky. I remember saying to someone that some poor person's out there. I turned and I saw my dad looking for me. Thought, what's he doing here? And he said to me, George is gone. I don't get it. He says, George is gone. George has gone missing on the beach. And I got my bits and we were straight off towards the beach. I mean, even now, it brings back emotions, just standing here. There was another family that the father and son were out in a dinghy. From what I've been told, they lost the oars and were drifting. The mother was panicking. She was calling for help. George was the one person that got up and he rushed out. He got to them, was with them. The lifeboat came out and picked him up. George was swimming back in, but then the wave went over him and he went under, and that was the last we ever saw of him. We waited with the police. You really believe somehow, oh, they're just going to find him and we'll all be a family together and we'll go home. And it didn't end up that way. But you've still got a little girl, Lucy, who's just over 2, that wants to know where her dad is.
My dad was the first to go out there. He never went into that sea thinking that he wouldn't come back. It did tear the family apart.
Because there was nothing we could do.
As a child, I didn't really know who I really was because I didn't know my dad. not really knowing who he was. I think that was the hardest thing as a kid. But then Grandad and Barry were always there to step up and make sure I had everything I needed and wanted and more.
But it's not the same.
And I feel so blessed that Barry was there, because I'm the person I am today because of Barry. And he's that dad that I never had, but I did.
There's nothing good about the sea. It's a cruel place.
Barry and Lucy want Dave to see if he can find George's final resting place, even after 40 years.
It's just to know where he's gone and to bring him home, really, to be... just to know that there's a place where he is. And at the moment, we don't know where he is.
It means so much closure to know exactly what happened to him that day. Just think I'll find that peace of knowing that, you know, he didn't abandon us. I can get to say my goodbyes to my dad.
Dave is now reopening the case to see if modern forensic techniques can discover what happened to George Johnstone and bring some closure to the family. The first task is to check if any bodies washed up in the UK around the time George went missing. George was a white male, 26 years old, and that day he was wearing blue swimming shorts.
We've got a whole series of databases on missing persons and unidentified bodies. The teams will have to go into those databases, cross-matching information. The answers have been in those databases for decades.
The databases draw a blank, nothing showing for bodies washed up in the UK at that time. But locate investigator Emma Tilley is heading to Norfolk to meet someone who might be able to help.
These cases are cold for a reason. They are difficult cases to solve. Really, the focus is around ensuring no stone has been left unturned.
Andy Guy is a cold case investigator for Norfolk Police. He's been looking into the George Johnstone case, accessing European police files to see if they throw up any leads.
Could you tell me about your initial actions on this particular case?
The North Sea countries, France, Belgium, Holland, Germany and Denmark, if they have a body found, they'll issue what's called a black notice, and that'll go through Interpol, and that's shared with all the affected countries.
Andy has struck gold. 2 bodies found within the right time frame.
One of those was a male that was recovered in the Baltic area, down sort of near Denmark. And the other was Ambleteuse, which is just south of Calais in France, pretty much the closest point to the UK mainland. And when you look at the dates, so the one in France was 10 days, the body turned up 10 days after George went missing. I think the one in the Baltic area was about the same time, but it's such a long way to travel. And because of the description of the body in France,
Yes.
a similar height to George and a similar age, it was then we thought, actually, this is potentially one and the same.
Okay. So in terms of the height, weight, this looked more like a potential match.
Yes.
With such a strong lead, Dave follows the trail to France.
It's important to go to France now so that we check the information to see if there are people there who remember that day in 1984 when that body was found.
He's teamed up with local journalist Hugo Bayo, who's been reinvestigating the case.
Here we are in Ambleteuse.
So back in 1984, would it look very much the same as it is now?
I don't think it changed a lot.
Yeah, it's quite a bleak beach, isn't it?
Yeah. 9th of September 1984, there was a body found. There's a lot of people who walk with their dog in the morning, and that's how someone found the body. The police papers of the whole case were destroyed in 2014. The main information was found from an article of a local newspaper. Last Sunday, they found a man. The body wore blue shorts, height 5'10". The body maybe was 30 years old, but we're not sure.
So, I mean, we're not working with a lot of information at the moment.
We have limited information, but we have little things. At least the blue short is a major information. But unfortunately, that's all we know.
It's not much to go on, but the fact that the description of the man, especially the shorts, matches George Johnstone is promising. And through the local police, Hugo's made another discovery.
So this way. The last one there.
Okay. Thank you, Hugo. It's quite emotional seeing the actual spot where the man who was found on that beach that day has been buried.
And you can see there's a place where it's written "à notre ami," it means to our friend.
And somebody's put flowers on the grave as well. Having spoken to Barry and Lucy and not knowing where George is, to think that there's
maybe he's here.
Possibly, this could be where he is. I think it would mean a lot to them.
Finding the grave is a breakthrough. If they can obtain DNA from the remains, they can see if it's a match with Lucy, George Johnstone's daughter. But that would mean exhuming the body.
It's a really big deal to do the exhumation because this is somebody's final resting place and they've been there for decades. And that shouldn't be disturbed without good reason. Everybody realises the gravity of the situation. This requires working with the local lawyers to make an application to the president of the court, the local judge, to make sure that everything that can be done has been done to this point. It's not something that's given lightly, so there will be questions, there will be challenge, and it's certainly not a given that the application will be approved.
Dave Grimstead is investigating the case of George Johnstone, who went missing off the Norfolk coast in 1984. He wants to know if a body that washed up 10 days later in northern France could be George. So he's asked Emma to go and see one of Locate's network of experts.
My name's John Rees and I'm a forensic oceanographer. Forensic oceanography is the prediction and the tracking of bodies in the marine environment.
John works with wind and tide data, going back decades, to model what happens to objects when they enter the sea. Anything from oil spills to human bodies.
Welcome to Seafast Endeavour.
Thank
Please
you.
come on board. And this is the bridge. This is where the whole of the ship's operations are run from.
John has made a model to estimate where George Johnstone might have drifted after he entered the sea at Hopton.
So what I had to do was go back to some of our climate archives that are available from European data centres and use the winds from that particular archive and put those into the modelling situation.
Would you be able to show me more?
Yeah, absolutely. What I've got here is the output of the numerical model. So I've got the position of where the individual went in here, And then I've got the Dutch coastline on the far side over here. And in the top right-hand corner, I've got the wind direction. And so what I do is I put 5,000 particles into the numerical model and track each one of those particles going forward in time. Now, what that gives us is what's called a probabilistic forecast. That shows you the movement of the body over those 10 days between entering the water and coming ashore on the French coastline. So I can start the model now, and you can see that these black particles represent the position of the body. The individual comes off the coast and then moves up and down on the flood and ebb tides, and they slowly move eastwards on the prevailing westerly wind directions. And they eventually end up at IJmuiden on the Dutch coastline, where I think the missing person would have come ashore. And the individual on the French coastline is probably from another incident further down the French coastline towards Normandy.
So a body that washed ashore in Ambleteuse is likely to have travelled southern up to northern?
That's what I would suggest, yeah.
It's difficult to, I guess, visualise the fact that it might not be George. Are there any external factors that could have had an influence on the possibility it could be George?
The only things that I can think of are if he's caught on a vessel. You know, there's been several cases where clothing is snagged on the bottom of a hull of a vessel and they've taken them into different directions. So that's a possibility.
Okay. This, of course, creates some sort of doubt, which I guess is healthy for us as investigators working on the case, to also have an element that it might not be the outcome that we want it to be. But nevertheless, you don't know what the key piece of the puzzle will be. John's mentioned external factors such as clothing getting caught on a ship or a vessel could have took the body in a southerly direction. And you need to keep an open mind as to, you know, what might have occurred.
So Emma sent through the forensic oceanography model. With all the cases that we look at, we tend to get that roller coaster with the different information that comes into the system, some of the expert opinion that comes in, so you think you've got that answer, but then you get information and opinion which makes you rethink. And there's still nothing that would rule out us going ahead with the exhumation. We've still got a man roughly the same height, blue shorts, and found 10 days after George disappeared from that beach in Norfolk. The information that we've got from the forensic oceanography is not certain, but it does help us manage the expectations of the family. We've been doing some research on the forensic oceanography, and that means looking at the different tidal flows. This just doesn't seem likely that George could go from Hopton Beach to Ambleteuse.
We've always prepared ourselves that there's that chance
we always know
it's not going to be Dad.
It's possibly not going to be the outcome we would really hope for.
Yeah.
But the good news is that the exhumation application's been approved now.
Wow. Puts you in it's a double at the moment, because the news you just said sort of sways not to possibly.
You've got George disappearing at Hopton Beach. You've got the man being found in Ambleteuse, description's so similar. There's certainly not anything there that says don't go ahead with the exhumation.
Yeah.
So I think it's only right to make sure you're aware that there is information out there that might suggest it might not be George.
And the description as well, kind of is that that's a, you know,
let's
a massive
hope
plus.
that side's wrong.
Yeah.
Just remember that you're not on your own for the next part. Whatever happens, we're here to support you and make sure that everything's done that can reasonably be done, really.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yeah. Trying to.
Yeah, I think we've...
It has to come to an end one way or another. And if it's George, then
Amazing.
That's better news for us.
Yeah.
But if it's not, then it's hopefully good news for someone else.
So the science, as far as the human identification is concerned, has moved on leaps and bounds. Not only have you got DNA, but you've got phenotyping, you've got isotope analysis, you've got the ability to use CT scans to create facial reconstructions. You can find out so much more about an individual through science. The team, they've managed to remove the concrete from on top of the grave, and then they're going to work on the preparation, ready for the exhumation first thing tomorrow morning. The only way that we're now able to find the answer for Lucy, for Barry and the family is to conduct an exhumation and to do that cross-matching. It's an early start tomorrow because it's such a sensitive thing. I mean, you look at the cemetery here at Ambleteuse, there are houses around, there are people around from the community. There's a real opportunity to be able to resolve this case using the latest science to pursue an answer for the family. I think most people, if you had disappeared from somebody's life and you were buried in a place where nobody knew where you were, you would want to be reunited with your family and to be brought closer to them and be a place where your family can remember you. Now is a really tense time because you never know if you're going to be able to extract DNA. And then, if you are able to extract the DNA, will that DNA hold the clue to who Ambleteuse Man is? We just don't know what the answer is going to be.
The remains have arrived for the autopsy.
C'est bon.
Dr. Marie Provost is the pathologist.
Ah, là, le crâne.
She finds bone fragments suitable for DNA extraction.
Je vais peut-être bien le nettoyer. Je vais le passer sous l'eau.
As well as looking for any other clues the remains could provide.
Ici, on a un tibia péroné, radius et cubitus, les côtes. Tibia, ça c'est le sacrum.
So is this what you would expect after 30 years of, more than 30 years of the body being in the grave?
À Ambleteuse, Les corps étaient un peu mieux conservés parce qu'il y a du sable et puis du coup qui dit du sable dit aussi du sel. Après le processus de décomposition et de putréfaction fait son œuvre et puis ouais, c'est pas étonnant qu'on le retrouve dans cet état-là, tout à fait.
Après j'ai mis le calcul et tout, mais bon.
Ça c'est le fémur.
Et ça on va couper juste là, hein.
Ouais. Sinon on va le mettre là-dessus.
Amène ça. C'est mieux à la boucherie.
On va couper le fémur pour rechercher la moelle osseuse à l'intérieur. Voilà, donc là c'est l'orifice en fait, c'est dans cet orifice-là que se trouve la moelle osseuse avec les cellules. Et donc c'est ça qu'on prélève pour rechercher l'ADN. Après l'os, il a l'air... il est pas mal, on peut peut-être avoir sur le... Ouais.
C'est là que tu vas l'avoir.
Ouais. Qu'on a retrouvé dans le voilà, le short de bain. Il y a une ceinture élastique avec ici 2 petits cordons pour serrer le pantalon. Et puis ça a une forme de slip de bain en fait. Ouais.
Ça sent bon, ça.
Yes.
Ça sent bon.
Ah merde. Non mais c'est des vieilles baskets. Le devant c'est là. Attends, je vais le mettre là peut-être. Et où est-ce que j'ai vu l'étiquette? Voilà.
Ok. R-O-D-A-O.
Donc le short, il est de couleur bleu marine, avec les 3 bandes blanches. Et bon, il y a des endroits où il s'est décoloré. Et la marque, c'est Rodeo, 81-86 cm et taille 32-34.
It's not always certain that the clothes that somebody's found in are those that they're going to be buried with. It's such a rare thing. Now we just don't know if this is George or whether Ambletu's man is somebody else's loved one. And it's by no means certain that we will be able to extract DNA from the samples that we have.
Et puis le crâne et les dents, on va les passer au scanner. Et puis comme ça, on aura on pourra faire une reconstruction. Voilà. Et puis on vous donnera également le short. Donc on va laver le short et on vous donnera le short également.
Yes, good.
Et puis donc quand on aura fini tout ça, moi je reprendrai le crâne et la mâchoire, on remettra dedans et puis tout le reste des ossements, on les laissera dans la tombe.
Now have the samples from Dr. Pruvo so that we're able to go back to the UK to work with the forensic providers to extract the DNA, compare that with the familial DNA from Lucy and the family. For me and for the whole team at Locate, we always have that emotional roller coaster in terms of the cases that we are working on. But everyone has a hope that we're going to be able to solve these cases.
Five weeks later, Dave is taking Barry and Lucy to meet Special Investigator Andy Guy for news of the DNA results.
Yeah,
Yeah, it feels really surreal today, actually.
Yeah. Scary in
Yeah.
a way.
Yeah, because all that time we've been talking about it, and now it's the reality, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
that kind of moment.
Actually going to find out, yeah,
Yeah.
one way or the other.
Yeah.
Lucy,
nice to
nice to
meet
meet you.
you.
Finally.
Andy.
Heard a lot about you.
Thanks for coming. Please take a seat. I'll come straight to the point. You know, we took your DNA, Lucy, and we compared that with the results that Dave's team got from the grave at Ambleteuse. I'm sorry to tell you, that's not a match. There is no familial link. So the man in Ambleteuse is not George.
Come on.
My personal thoughts were it was your dad because of the shorts and the time, but that isn't the case.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the work you've done.
It's the least we could do, and I'm just sorry it wasn't the result we wanted to hear.
It might not be the outcome we wanted, but someone will benefit, I hope.
This is somebody's loved one. This is their equivalent of George. And without this work, the DNA of Ambleteuse man would not have been retrieved, and there might be an answer on the database out there.
I don't think any of us, including yourselves, done this lightly.
No.
You know, you're taking a body out of a grave.
Yeah.
But you've got to look at the bigger picture and hope it's for a good reason, and I think it was for a good reason.
So we'll be able to work to get this loaded up onto the national and international databases, continue to do more research, and we won't give up on George's case either.
Oh, it never ends.
No.
Never ends.
No.
And we'll still hope
Yep.
something somewhere comes along. You never say never.
Yeah.
It's brought us closer together.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it's helped.
I think if we hadn't done this, Lucy, you'd always wonder.
Oh,
And
definitely.
you'd never know, so it's not
Yeah.
the result you want, but it is a closure of that
Yeah,
particular avenue.
definitely. Yeah.
I mean, your profiles are on the missing person database
Okay.
as a kinship, so if there ever was a recovery somewhere, that they would automatically be searched.
Okay.
So we never know what's around the corner. So they're permanently there; they're not going to go anywhere.
Thank you both.
Yeah, we can't thank you both enough for everything you've done, even though it's not what we really hoped for. At the end of the day,
But it is for someone.
It is for someone, and
It
that's
is for someone.
yeah.
Just want to give you a hug now.
Thanks, Mary. It's lovely to meet you.
No, thank you.
I think it's always going to be highly emotional for everyone, for all of us that are engaged in hoping that this was George.
Lucy's DNA will now be uploaded to the international database of missing people. If George's body is ever found, the DNA will instantly direct investigators to the family. Now, Dave has a new case on his hands. Having exhumed the body, he needs to find out who is Ambleteuse man. The mystery of the body washed up on a beach in northern France dates back nearly 40 years.
So when we started, we knew very little about this person other than being found on a beach on the 9th of September 1984, wearing blue shorts. So being able to do the exhumation and establish that he was buried in these blue shorts, and then we were able to work with Dr. Prubo to make sure that we got a good CT scan of the skull. That means that we can work towards a facial reconstruction where we can bring those features to life that somebody may recognise.
With a CT scan, modern forensic science should allow Locate to produce an image of what the man looked like. In Dundee, Dr. Toby Holton is an expert in reconstructing facial images from this kind of data.
Facial approximation is a means of predicting the facial form. Typically, it's performed when your standard forms of identification are not available. The likes of dental records or other forms of radiographic evidence.
Dave has passed on the CT scan taken of the skull during the autopsy in France.
The quality looks fantastic. This is exactly everything that we need, because the more detail that I can actually see, the more likely I'll be able to generate a more reliable facial approximation. When importing the scan, the first thing that we want to do is think about applying the facial soft tissue thickness reference data. Over the decades, people have compiled data banks of average tissue depth and give you a gauge as to approximately how thick those tissues are in order to generate the general face. After tissue depth placement, what I like to do is import the eyes. So eyes on average are about 24 millimeters in diameter. The sphere shape will be placed into the bony orbit, and then once the eyes are positioned in place, we're now in an ideal situation to start building up the muscles. We have some pre-modeled muscles that we can actually just guide into the correct placement. He's going to have quite a squared jaw, got a very strong brow ridge, quite a masculine sort of face, you could say. The next thing is to generate the skin to give you a better idea of how the individual would have looked with a bit more of a realistic texture. We keep the image black and white. We avoid a reference to color. If we don't have those details of color, then it's best not to assume that. So we create a very neutral looking image. So one thing that does stand out about him is that he has what we call a clear sign of diastema, which is referring to the spacing between the teeth. There's a very distinct gap between his two front teeth. So that is going to be quite a unique feature for him. So bearing that in mind, I'll go about the facial approximation, not only with his face rested with the mouth closed, but I'll also introduce a degree of expression in order to show the mouth open, because that could be a very useful feature for them to refer to.
With this new image, Dave can prepare a public appeal. First, he needs to pull together everything they know about the man.
So we know now that we've done the exhumation that he was buried in the shorts that he was found in, and they are blue shorts, but they've got these 3 white stripes down the side. They're not in a great state, so what we are able to do is try and find some clothing that is exactly the same as the image that we're looking at here. The label gives it a make of rodeo. Just quickly looking online before we give this to one of the research teams, you look at the rodeo brand, and it looks like it's from CNA, predominantly a brand that was sold in France. We've been able to go back to John and look at the forensic oceanography. Based on his experience, Ambleteuse man may have drifted to Ambleteuse from Normandy, from the Le Havre area. Really gives us reason and a purpose to go to France and begin to work with the media there. Now we got Eat Face. Makes it a human story, I think. It means that we can show this to the public and they can relate to something. So I've come back to France to get the story of Ambleteuse man out into the French media. Hugo.
Hey.
Good to see you again. So this is the new facial reconstruction.
Seems like a real person.
So now the key is the public appeal.
Yeah, so we have here the article in our newspaper. So it said a public appeal for the missing man of Ambleteuse. And there we have the website version. Okay. I will send it right away. just going to share this on Facebook page.
Bonjour. So with this case, we know that the DNA has been uploaded into the international system, so we know there's not a match with any existing DNA that's in the Interpol databases. We're reliant on reaching out to the public. Having that image may just be the spark for somebody. The appeals work because it's about getting this story started and then seek to amplify it. Now we've got this out in the newspaper. This will get picked up by social media, it will get picked up by other media outlets.
C'est ce qu'on appelle un cold case, une affaire non élucidée. Celle-ci date de 1984. Sur les côtes françaises, un corps non identifié a été retrouvé.
What do we know about what happened here?
So all we know is that we've got a body that washes up on the 9th of September 1984. Somewhere out there, there's a family, the equivalent of Barry and Lucy over here in France.
After several weeks, there's a breakthrough. Dave is contacted by a woman living in northern France who thinks she recognises the picture. She hopes it's her brother, who went missing 6 months before the body washed up in Ambleteuse in 1984. The woman, who doesn't want to be identified, is translated by Hugo.
In February 1984, family finds that he was missing. Never had any news from him. So when she saw the facial reconstruction, she does this for her parents who are now died. All their lives they tried to find their son, and she wants to do it for them.
So the only way now to make a formal identification will be by comparing your DNA with the DNA obtained from the man found in Ambleteuse.
A DNA sample from the sister is sent off to the lab. For now, Dave's done all he can.
We know that the direction of travel fits with that tidal flow. When you listen to the story, you listen to the age, you listen to the timing, the comparison between the facial images that we've got there, it remains a possibility.
A week later, the news comes in. Despite all the coincidences, a similar-looking face, the right time frame, and the right location, the DNA match is negative. Dave has hit another dead end. But he has one more forensic trick up his sleeve. The DNA from Ambleteu's man was analysed by forensic science company Cellmark, based in Oxfordshire. Andrew MacDonald is their head of forensic testing.
Hi there, Andrew.
Let me take you up to the DNA laboratory.
Okay, so...
Using cutting-edge new techniques, he should be able to provide much more detail about what the man looked like.
There's a lot that we can start to do now that we have the DNA material to work from. And the technique we would be looking at would be to use massively parallel sequencing that looks at a number of different areas of DNA all at the same time. In the forensic context, it's brand new, but we've already used it on a number of cases so far, and in one of those cases, it changed the course of the investigation quite significantly.
So in terms of Ambleteu's man, where do you think massive parallel sequencing will potentially make a difference to that investigation?
We should be able to get a good indication of the individual's ancestry, both biparental and paternal line. We should also be able to get a good prediction for their eye colour and their hair colour. There are new tests within the technique that will identify someone's predisposition to having straight hair or non-straight hair. In males, whether they're predisposition to going bald. And if we put that information into the facial reconstruction, that will hopefully provide a more accurate image for any appeal that then subsequently goes out.
With these new details, including hair and eye colour, Toby Holton can produce an even more realistic image. The new picture offers a chance to relaunch the appeal. Dave and the team will not stop searching, trying to give solace to the families who still don't know what happened to their loved ones.
Everybody working in this field has a passion for trying to find that name, find that answer, and be able to reunite people who are unidentified with their family, with friends. Not knowing what happened leads to a huge amount of trauma for families. It's quite emotional. So for us, the search continues.
There are almost 1,000 unidentified bodies in the UK.
The body was found floating on the sea.
Mysteries. People found with no identification.
Those people who have died and then remained unidentified after death, they have no voice.
Investigators at Locate International have files on these cold cases.
All the work that's been done so far has failed to find a name.
To try and solve them and put a name and a story to the bodies.
It's a bit like a whodunit, isn't it?
A team of top scientists and experts use cutting-edge forensics to reinvestigate seemingly unsolvable cases.
Any cases where unidentified remains are found, which include clothing or textiles, I could be brought in to do analysis.
To me, that would be a kind of blunt force trauma.
You can find out so much more about an individual through science, which may help identify them.
Because for each unidentified body, there's a family whose loved one has disappeared without trace.
Just to know that there's a place where he is. And at the moment, we don't know where he is.
I can get to say my goodbyes to my dad.
The 16th of February, 1994. A young man's body is found in a quiet London side street. He isn't carrying any ID and nobody has reported him missing. The police investigation draws a blank. To this day, he remains unidentified.
Yeah, I think Berry Walk is the next one on the right here.
Okay.
Now, nearly 30 years later, Locate International is reopening the case. Dave Grimstead and his fellow investigator, Emma Tilley, have come to where the body was found.
This is the article from the Kensington Post. See the headline there, police still baffled by mystery vagrant who froze to death in a Chelsea side street. This is the side street, this is Berry Walk.
After all this time, there's little evidence to go on.
It talks about the body being found on February the 16th. A similar sort of time to we are now. And it is, you can really feel the cold. I mean, the description is, 5'8", black, short hair, black beard. The only clue appears to be a piece of paper that was found in the man's pocket with the name Vincent Akbarov written on it.
Despite this, no one ever came forward to claim the body. The death was recorded as unidentified. The challenge now is to see whether a new investigation can uncover this young man's identity.
You'll find the outline of the inquest report.
Dave has pulled together a team with the skills to crack this case. Along with Emma, there's facial reconstruction expert Toby Holton and genealogist Grace Towers.
As we begin to pursue the leads in this case, making sure that we've got a dignified image of this man to help us with our investigations is going to be important. Toby, I'm wondering if you've had a chance to look at the image that's on the National Crime Agency website. Is there anything that we can do with that image?
You know, he is recently deceased in that image, so there's not much in the way of decomposition presenting in the individual. So I think it's certainly easy enough for me to perform what we call a post-mortem depiction to sort of restore a more lifelike appearance for this person.
I think that'd be really valuable, Toby. We know that most of the cases that are resolved in terms of unidentified people are those where there's DNA or there are forensic opportunities. It's finding where this person is buried is going to be key to the next stage that we take. Emma, you'll be trying to find where he's been laid to rest.
For now, the team call the unidentified man Vincent, the name found on the piece of paper in his pocket. They're also assuming he was homeless. Cases like this form an important part of Locate International's work, cases that can often slip through the net.
Even today, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've seen a few homeless people sleep on the streets when we were on the way here. Obviously, it's freezing cold. One particular person I noticed, a man who was asleep on the pavement. The exact same thing that happened to Vincent could happen to him tonight. You know, it's an ongoing problem that hasn't been solved. So maybe shining a light on these cases could help in some way.
Now, the forensic work begins. In Dundee, Dr. Toby Holton is an anthropologist who specialises in facial reconstructions.
It's deeply sad that people leave this earth in a situation where nobody is there to account for them. Being able to be involved in this work and potentially connect loved ones with, you know, someone that's been missing from them for however long could be, you know, quite a special process.
Toby has a photo of Vincent's face that was taken during the post-mortem. From this, he can produce an image of what Vincent would have looked like before he died.
And thankfully, that post-mortem image was of pretty good quality. We want to just change the positioning of the face. You can see that there's a clear dryness of his skin that's happened post-mortem. We can actually soften that. I would say that one of the biggest issues is that there is some fabric that's interfering with the full view of his hair. So what I'll do is refer to an image bank and find individuals with a similar hair texture and just produce a finish to the hair to make it look a little bit more complete at least. And also use an image bank to superimpose a reference to an ear, neck, and shoulders, and I'll blur out that information so that it's not too suggestive directly of this individual. It completes the face but doesn't create a significant feature in the face. It makes a dramatic difference the moment you insert the eyes. We're used to looking at the eyes. You know, it's an important aspect of our face in how we communicate with others non-verbally. The critical thing with post-mortem depiction is essentially to reverse the effects of decomposition that's occurring in the post-mortem image. It just creates a dramatic difference for people to be able to, I hope, cope a little bit more with the process of recognizing a loved one. It can be deeply satisfying. And there we go, yeah.
With this new picture, they can now start looking for Vincent's family. Locate International are investigating the case of Vincent, a young man found dead on the streets of Chelsea nearly 30 years ago.
We think every unidentified person's remains should be properly recorded. Why I'm so passionate about these particular cases is because there is perhaps a lack of them having a family or friends or a support network, somebody who's there to fight their case for them, be their voice. Because these people, nobody's ringing the police on their behalf, you know, and that's our job and that's what we've got to do for them.
The team don't even know where Vincent was buried.
Yeah, it's really important that we find Vincent's remains so that we can make that comparison with DNA from family. It's the primary source of making an identification.
Vincent's burial would have been organised by the local council in what's called a public health funeral. So Kensington and Chelsea Council, where he died, should have the record of where he's buried. Emma's meeting James Sheedy, who's worked at the council since 1994.
Hello, Emma, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks very much for your time today.
No problem.
Would you tell us more about what would happen during those public health funerals?
In an unknown case, the council will always make sure that somebody is there at the funeral, and one of our team would have attended because we would never let someone have a funeral with absolutely nobody there. And even though it's better, obviously, if someone who knows you's at the funeral, it's just a mark of respect, we would send somebody along to be there. Almost certainly it will have been a burial because that was the policy at the time for unknown people, that we would bury them rather than cremate them in case anyone did come forward later on.
OK. And would you be able to show me what you were able to find in terms of an archived record existing?
This is our archives database, shows all cases. We can see the list of the funerals that we've done for unknown people. This is the highlighted one there. So it's a black African Caribbean man who died on the 16th of February 94.
Yeah.
It shows the archive record and the date that it was sent to archives, but that's pretty much it, I'm afraid. That's all the information that file will show. That would have shown where the burial or cremation took place. It would have had the invoice for the funeral, etc. But unfortunately, we don't have that. We don't retain the records. Our retention policy for public health funerals is 7 years after the death of the person.
It's a major setback. The funeral records have been destroyed, but there might be another route.
So who do you think the funeral director might have been?
So at the time, we don't have the records again, but from memory, it would have been E.M. Kendall, who were a funeral director in East London, but who did our funerals for a short while.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
There are no national guidelines for what should happen in the case of unidentified bodies. And just like here in Kensington and Chelsea, many other areas destroy the records after just 7 years.
Even the current system still presents a problem to these type of cases, because if someone was to be found and remain unidentified 7 years ago, their record at public health funeral is about to be deleted.
But Emma's not giving up. She now has the name of the company which almost certainly arranged Vincent's funeral. Kendall's has since been taken over by another funeral director, and that's where she's heading next.
I'm hopeful today that we might find a record of Vincent's funeral. Thank you. Hi John, it's Emma.
Good morning, Emma.
Nice to meet you.
Come in.
Thank you.
We took over Kendall's 12 years ago. When we took over the business, I mean, old Mr. Kendall was still living above the premises and stayed there until he died. He was almost a bit of a recluse in that flat. And unfortunately, he kept very sparse records, if anything at all.
Even though Kensington and Chelsea is far away from Dalston, we know that Kendall had that contract, he was quite unique in that he wasn't just his local boroughs that he was working with.
No. Kendall was quite a unique character because what he would do is look around London, and not just London, Hertfordshire, surrounding areas. And whenever he knew that there was a contract, a local authority, hospital, he always got them because he charged such a small amount of money that no other funeral director was really interested in it.
Right.
And the boroughs at the time were happy to use you know, because spending public money, I suppose, they had to do the cheap way out.
Okay. And would Kendall's lack of record keeping, will that hinder us finding a record at the cemeteries or crematoriums? Or
No.
they should...
They should, you know...
Independently,
Independently,
yeah.
somewhere there is
A record. Oh, yeah.
You know, and it's not... Although he was a poor record keeper,
Yeah.
he would have, at the time, been giving details to a cemetery.
Great.
They should have the record.
Great.
Problem is with Mr. Kendall is, where did he do the burial?
So Vincent could possibly be buried or cremated anywhere in London, not necessarily close to Chelsea, where he died.
Knowing Mr. Kendall,
Could be anywhere.
Could
Yeah.
be anywhere. It's a bit like a whodunit, isn't it?
I know.
Hope springs eternal, as they say. Let's see what happens.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Really
Cheers, Emma.
appreciate it.
No worries.
It's a daunting task. They need to search every cemetery in the Greater London area to find one unnamed man buried 3 decades ago.
This is a list of around 30 to 40 cemeteries and crematoriums. That is where Kendall operated from back in the mid-90s. West Ham, I need to follow up with West Ham today. Is that the cemetery that's now known as Kensal Green?
Just like the local councils, all the cemeteries have different systems. These are paper records that may have been archived, lost or destroyed years ago.
Freya, if you're okay to take Western Cemetery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dave, if you wanted to take Ladywell Cemetery. This whole area has got to be worth further exploration. Hi there, my name's Emma Tilley at the charity Locate International. Would it be possible to speak with the manager at all?
The first one I spoke to, they were a Jewish cemetery. They wouldn't accept someone without a name in a Jewish cemetery.
No luck with Islington and Camden. Anything prior to 2000 hasn't been digitised, it's all in the basement. So we've checked Gunnersbury and Hanwell. Both of those have done a physical check and no, he's not there either. Within the week that Vincent died, a man died the day after him and a man died 3 days before him. All 3 were male, all 3 remained unidentified, and all 3, within the case details, are listed as possibly homeless.
While the search for Vincent's final resting place continues, Emma and Grace have decided to trawl the local newspaper archives.
Back in Kensington.
Yeah.
There's nothing more about Vincent's case, but Grace has found articles about other cases involving unidentified bodies. They paint a grim picture.
The first thing I found was an article about a case from 1994, which there are definitely some similarities. And a man among the Ladbroke Grove community died on January 6th and was cremated on the order of the coroner's court weeks later without his family being notified. As it happens, he was cremated, I think, 2 days before Vincent died, which is a very disturbing case.
There are worrying parallels with Vincent's case. In 1994, the body of another unidentified black man was found on the streets of London. But he was cremated, without any effort being made to identify him. If that also happened to Vincent, it would mean no chance of obtaining DNA. And there's more.
We're going to have a little look at the microfiche of the Kensington News and Post. The story is that basically the husband of a North Kensington woman was cremated again by the council without being informed.
That's interesting.
The last somewhat similar case involved a woman who was found dead in North Kensington at the time of the discovery of her body. Her identity was very much uncertain. Nobody knew how long she'd been there, nobody knew who she was. And, it did come to the point of inquest, and she was identified primarily by this name was written in her handbag, which was found with her body. Her family were not provided with details of whether she'd been buried, cremated, all record had been destroyed, and unfortunately, as far as I know,
has still not been located.
Yeah.
These are only cases that have been publicised in the media. I'm sure there's many more that might not have even been discovered by family members.
It's becoming clear that it might be impossible to find Vincent's body.
The further and further we progress on Vincent's case, the more evident it becomes that process, practice and procedure is rarely followed 100% to the T.
The search for Vincent's body has stalled, but there's more evidence for the team to investigate. One crucial clue was the piece of paper found on the body that had the name Vincent on it. If this really was his name, it might be possible to track down relatives or other people that knew him.
It's really important that we finally find his identity, and the only option that exists now is to speak to friends who knew Vincent and would recognise him from the image.
The original police inquiry focused on the handwritten name, Vincent Akpororoff. Investigator Grace has been digging deeper into this name. Back in 1994, there were no digitised databases or web searches. Putting the name Akpororoff and other possible variations into the internet now draws a complete blank. There's no record of such a name anywhere in the world. So she looks again at the original handwriting.
One of the first things that we've had done is to perform an image enhancement of this name. We have the advantage of technology, image enhancements that was not available at the time. And that's been very revealing for us. We've arrived at the conclusion that this man's name is Vincent Akpororo rather than Akprof, as was originally noted and listed on the missing persons site for this man.
This could be a crucial breakthrough. If the police had the wrong name in 1994, it would explain why they got nowhere. With the real name, it might now be possible to track down Vincent's family. Locate International have made a breakthrough in their investigation. They've discovered a possible name for the young man found dead nearly 30 years ago. Now, they can look into the background and history of the name Vincent Akpororo. This is Grace's speciality.
I'm a genealogist. Genealogy is the practice of studying families and their histories, how people are descended from each other.
And Grace quickly makes progress.
The interesting thing is that the variant Akpororo that Vincent's family had, there are only about 40 people in the entire world with that surname, and I think 39 of them are in Nigeria.
Now, working with what she thinks is the right spelling, she makes a discovery.
There's a birth certificate that I found through Ancestry.
Oh, incredible.
Vincent was born in 1961, right in the middle of our age range in London, not far from the Discovery site.
Wow, that's quite a revelation. How did you feel when you found this?
I think fairly elated is the way to describe it. And one of the main things is that it gives us his exact date of birth. It also gives us his middle name and the name and surname of his father, which is Michael Akpororo, and similarly for his mother, who is Elizabeth Akpororo, formerly Akpochafo. And it also gives us an address for the couple at the time of his birth.
And is that address in London?
It is, it's in Battersea. And another kind of really useful piece of information it gives us is that it lists the occupation of his father as a law student.
Okay.
Using this information, Grace is able to find the marriage certificate of Vincent's parents.
This is the certificate?
Yeah, it's a really useful document. It contains kind of more than I'd ever hoped it would, to be honest.
Okay.
We can also see that this marriage took place in Battersea at St Vincent's Church.
Wow.
It's another Vincent.
So that could explain Vincent's birth name?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that church would be something that we need to look into as a real key line of inquiry. So at the start of the day, all we had was a name. Now we've left with a potential address, parents, information about what his parents did, information about the churches or religious institutions he was connected to. Really excited to see how this progresses.
Dave is heading to the church named on the marriage certificate to search for any clues that could lead him to Vincent Akpororo's family or friends.
So we've come here to the church at Vincent de Paul in London to see Father Tim Galligan. We know that Vincent's parents were married here, and we're hoping to find more information about Vincent. Good morning, Father Galligan.
That's right. Hello.
My name's Dave. Nice to meet you. We've come here today following a young man called Vincent who was found dead on the streets of Chelsea back in 1994. He was homeless, and we've now found the marriage certificate for his parents, Michael and Elizabeth. They married here back in 1961.
And obviously lived, at least at that time, at an address, in our parish. Yeah.
So what's the history of the name Vincent de Paul? So it obviously meant something to the family to call him Vincent.
Well, they might have named him after the patron saint. That's his statue over there. He was a 17th century French priest who worked with the needy and the poor. You can see him holding a little child because I think he worked with other people to try and rescue abandoned children off the streets.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, well that's wow.
A big figure.
And what we're trying to do is find out more about the connection between Vincent and the church here, Vincent de Paul, and seeing if there's any more records.
We've got baptismal records from right back from the foundation of the church. We can go and look.
Okay.
So this is one of the volumes of our registration of baptisms, and you've got a birth date, so we know it's 61. There are quite a lot of records here, but let's see what we can find. People were usually baptised fairly quickly after their birth. There we are.
Okay.
There we are. Vincent.
Wow, okay.
So born 28th of September, 61, and baptised on the 12th of November, 61.
I notice is that Vincentius? Or?
Yes, in those days they wrote all these things in Latin.
Okay.
And then the godparents, one of whom I think is connected with that address, or at least is now.
Okay, so that's somebody we might be able to speak to find out some more.
Absolutely, yes. I noticed that next to Vincent's entry, there is another one with another name that looks as if it could be Nigerian. I think there were quite a few Nigerian families around this area at that time.
It's obviously a strong connection, isn't it?
Yeah.
For us, this is really helpful. Seeing his baptism records and being able to give that name back to him and actually see his name, Vincent, recorded in an official document, particularly one that's, it's handwritten. We've got the names of the people who were here at the time. It now gives us somewhere else to go to find out more about who Vincent really is. Thank you, Father.
You're very
That's
welcome.
Really
Yes, I'm glad we could help you. Sometimes record keeping can be tedious, but sometimes it's very useful later on as well.
It's really valuable.
Vincent Akpororo was almost certainly Nigerian. His parents were married at the church in 1961, and he was baptised there later that year. It's likely Vincent's father, Michael Akpororo, came to London as part of a wave of migration in the early 60s. Nigeria gained its independence from Britain in 1960. The new country was desperately short of doctors, lawyers, engineers, and teachers. Back then, anyone with a Nigerian passport had the right to live and work in the UK. So tens of thousands came to Britain to study and train. Michael Akpororo went to university in London, where he studied law. The biggest Nigerian communities were in London, including the Clapham Battersea area, where the Akpororos lived. But many of these migrants were only here temporarily. Thousands moved back to Nigeria to use their new qualifications to help to build the new nation. Genealogist Grace has discovered that Michael Akpororo was one of these people. He returned to Nigeria sometime in the late 1960s to pursue a career in law.
One of the most interesting things that we see is that Michael Akpororo was in the legal profession over in Nigeria and actually quite high up. He's a judge. There are also kind of some tributes, which are all, again, you know, glowing tributes.
But did Vincent go back with his parents, or did he stay in London? He would only have been 8 or 9 years old. If he did return to Nigeria, Vincent Akpororo could still be alive and living there with his family. It's important that Dave investigates this possibility while being sensitive to any of Vincent's relatives.
We need to understand Vincent, his background, his family's background, to make sure we've exhausted every one of those efforts to check if he's alive, but also make informed decisions about the next step.
To try and find out more about the family, Dave makes a call to Kaura Abdullahi Abubakar, a Nigerian-based investigator.
Good morning, Kara. How are you?
Yeah, hi, Dave.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to us, because what we'd like to try and do, if it's okay with you, is see if you can assist us with some research on a man who was found unidentified on the streets in Chelsea in London.
All right.
All our research that's been done by the team indicates that he's the son of Michael and Elizabeth Akporo, and Michael came over to the UK to study law. So that's where we think it would be great if you're able to assist us with the background research.
So it's something I can do very well.
Thank you, Kara. Hopefully we can progress this.
While Kaura begins his work in Nigeria, Dave is trying to gain a better understanding of the Nigerian community in London.
So when we're searching for anyone or trying to find that name, understanding who they are, their networks, their culture is so important. So obviously we don't know about the customs, the culture in Nigeria.
Dave has discussed the case with British-Nigerian author Lydia Olataiwo.
I'm Dave, nice to meet you.
Dave. Nice to meet you.
Lydia, like Vincent, was born in London to Nigerian parents.
Lovely.
Thank
you very much.
My parents' family friends were in Clapham area, quite a few of them. There was that very close-knitted community amongst them. And it's like, they share things together. They do, you know, if somebody knows something is going on or, you know, something good is good to buy, then all of them do it.
When she was 11, Lydia's parents took her back to Nigeria for secondary school. But after finishing school, she decided to return to the UK without her parents.
I just wanted to come back. I just felt this was my home. And maybe that's what Vincent felt, that, you know, this is where he belongs and he feels he may get better opportunities here. I came back to the UK and it wasn't what I left. It wasn't how I felt it was when I was growing up. You know, you have people who are supporting you, but when you are older, like you're over 18 and now you're coming into a country that you thought you knew, you suddenly realize that it's not what you thought it was, and you either thrive or you fall. Somebody like Vincent coming over and maybe not having that person to mentor him or support him, it would be very hard.
It must have been so disorientating for him, I think, just to come back to having grown up and then come back and things feel different.
And because you don't have any supporting mechanism, you're alone.
Yeah.
You're very alone, and you're trying to fight it. And if you're not able to push against the barrier, you've pushed against one, and then you've got 10 more to push through, it gets to a point where you get so tired. As a young child. But moving into school, they call me all kinds of names and make fun of my name itself because my parents didn't give me an English name. They wanted me to use, and that's, they wanted me to use the Nigerian name they gave me. So that makes it even worse because the kids in the playground, it's worse now than it was then, I can say. But, they make fun of the name, they make fun of everything, and they call you all kinds of black this and that. Fast forward to the 90s, for somebody like Vincent as well, it's very possible for them to have been still calling him those names, still saying nasty things to him.
I think you described it really well, kind of that almost shutting down. It's kind of, you must get to a point where it's just...
It's
too much.
They've had enough. I'm trying to piece the story together myself, and there are a whole lot of things, but I feel that it was the network that he didn't have that maybe caused what happened to him. Yeah. He's alone.
Lydia's insight could offer Dave crucial clues into Vincent's story. Did Vincent come back to London? Did he feel lost and isolated, as Lydia fears? Dave and the team have been trying to track down someone who might have known the Akpororo family.
The key part of our work is really finding somebody who can make that identification, so somebody who's known him for a long period of time, so that we are sure that the identification they're making is correct, but also that we can piece together what they tell us about Vincent, about his life, and match that to the circumstances that he was found in.
The marriage certificate showed the address where Vincent's parents lived when he was born. Dave and Emma are heading there to see whether, even after 60 years, there's anyone who remembers the family.
Hi there.
Hi.
Chris.
Yes.
Hi, Chris. I'm Dave.
Hi, Dave.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, hi, nice to meet you.
Dave and Emma have come to visit Chris, who lives at the address in South London where Vincent's family lived in the 1960s.
We were able to find a death certificate for an unknown man in 1994 who died in Chelsea. So that's Vincent, who died, and on his death certificate, unfortunately, he was unknown male, and that's what's obviously led us here to this address.
They want to know if Chris recognises the man in the photo as Vincent Akpororo.
Yeah. Yeah, that is Vincent, yeah.
After months of investigation, they finally have a positive ID.
How do you feel seeing it now after all this time?
It's very sad. I mean, my brothers and sisters all feel very sad, and sometimes we feel that we could have done more to help. Yeah, but I was young. So sad.
It turns out that Chris's family were close to the Akpororos all those years ago.
So his dad was sort of my dad's mentor. In this house, they used to be like law students.
Right.
Yes. And when his dad moved back to Nigeria, my dad moved in.
Okay.
Yeah. So my dad was a lawyer as well.
Right. So Vincent's father was a mentor for your father?
For my dad, yes,
Right.
yes. And they were very close in their working life back in Nigeria as well. Vincent came way back in late 80s, and he came with his dad with the intention of putting him into a mute school.
Right.
Yeah. Getting some help, because he wouldn't get help that he needed in Nigeria. Did you guys know that? He couldn't hear and couldn't speak.
I didn't
No, we didn't know that, and I think it's it kind of gives us a reason why his name might have been written down, because I can imagine you'd have to keep showing it to people.
Yeah, he had a flip book,
Yeah.
which he wrote, and he had pencils.
When was the last time that you saw Vincent about?
94, yeah, I would say. He was always hovering around Clapham Junction area. You know, I think he got used to living on the street. I say living on the street, I don't know if he was sleeping on the street, but he was just roaming around Clapham Junction, you know, yeah. I think he had help. He was housed, but he was never happy.
Yeah.
He was not happy at one housing I knew about, and he wrote it down that, you know, he always saw talking people as like a different...
Right, okay.
Yeah, you know, they're talking people. He wants to be housed with mute people. Yeah.
So people with a similar
disabilities, yeah. He was frustrated with his situation, He struggled, you know. It got to a point where he started getting angry with me when I was trying to help him. He'll see me coming and he'll turn away, you know, So that was the point whereby I decided to leave him alone, because he was like, you know, I don't know, he had some experiences, bad experiences from where he was rehoused. He had one accommodation, people were bullying him and things like that.
Okay.
Then he had another accommodation, he was with people of similar disabilities, and I don't know what happened. From there on. So
what was his kind of passion in life? What was it
he was artistic. He wanted to do something in art. He had dreams and plans that he was thinking, but he was having a lot of obstacles to achieve those things. You know what I mean? He wanted to go to some sort of art school or design school or creative school. He had a little, like a book he doodled in, and he was always drawing caricatures, you know, quite like cartoonish kind of things. Yeah.
Your father still alive?
No. They both passed away, I mean, I saw Vincent's dad at my dad's funeral.
Right.
Yeah, but it was my dad's funeral. I didn't mention anything about Vincent or anything. And he didn't ask me, to be honest, so...
Yeah. We really appreciate you taking the time to tell us more about Vincent, because we only get the information that we can find. And having somebody tell us what life was like for Vincent and about Vincent himself, it makes a difference to know the person.
Oh, it does,
I think it definitely feels emotional when you hear about somebody's life that you're only seeing through the paper records and the information that's online, and to hear it firsthand from Chris about Vincent's life and who he was.
Yes, we can only imagine, I suppose, what Vincent was going through at the time, having moved from Nigeria to the UK, wanting to establish a bit of freedom and independence, and obviously that kind of desire to be independent has then led him to be, you know, on the streets, unfortunately.
With identification confirmed, Dave calls his investigator in Nigeria, Kaura, to see if he's managed to contact Vincent's family.
Yeah, hi Dave, how have you been?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay. Well, after talking to a few people and doing some research on the family, I was able to get a phone number, which I called and speak to them directly. I told them that we have made a positive identification of Vincent, and he was the man found in Chelsea in 1994.
And how did they react to that?
The family told me that they were aware Vincent had passed away, but they didn't know the details. They wanted to lay everything to rest.
Okay, so hopefully the understanding of what happened to Vincent is helped them in some way?
They told me that they appreciate the work that Locate have done, but don't want to have any further involvement in the case.
I can understand that, Cara, and I think it's good that you're there. They may have questions that come up
Thank you, Dave. It's been nice working with you, and I'm happy to have been of help.
Yeah, cheers, Karen. So when a case like this has been unresolved for so long, being able to hopefully provide some solace for the family, some understanding of what happened to their loved one, to take away that feeling of not knowing what actually happened, you can only hope is going to provide some solace for the family.
Now they've done everything they can on the case, Locate International can pass all the information to the police. Vincent at Peroro will no longer be registered unidentified. Dave and Emma come to a garden of remembrance in a London cemetery to lay a memorial to Vincent.
It feels sad and bittersweet today that we haven't been able to find where Vincent's remains are. However, we've been able to provide a space and a place for him to be remembered and his life to be remembered.
I remember when we started looking at Vincent's case, and all we had was that reference in the newspaper to a vagrant. It was just so sanitised and cold, and now we get such a better understanding of who Vincent was.
He came to London with goals, targets, dreams around learning to sign, learning to develop his art skills, and the fact that that's something that London couldn't provide for him is, it's really heartbreaking.
They haven't been able to find Vincent's final resting place. It's a reflection of the way unidentified bodies are dealt with across the country.
There have clearly been improvements within the system, because we can see that in the figures, because the number of cases have tended to decline. There's a huge systemic problem, is the lack of national guidance that stipulates how unidentified persons should be dealt with. From start to finish, there's not one policy, not one procedure that outlines to police, coroners, funeral directors, whoever's involved, this is how information should be recorded, this is how it should be shared, retained, destroyed, whatever it is, that isn't set out.
All of these things could be critical to solving and finding that name, and yet everyone does it differently. And what we can learn from Vincent's life, and then what we can learn from all the other cases that we're looking at as we gradually find more about their lives, might help improve the system overall.
There are almost 1,000 unidentified bodies in the UK.
The body was found floating on the sea.
Mysteries. People found with no identification.
Those people who have died and then remained unidentified after death, they have no voice.
Investigators at Locate International have files on these cold cases.
All the work that's been done so far has failed to find a name.
To try and solve them and put a name and a story to the bodies.
It's a bit like a whodunit, isn't it?
A team of top scientists and experts use cutting-edge forensics to reinvestigate seemingly unsolvable cases.
Any cases where unidentified remains are found, which include clothing or textiles, I could be brought in to do analysis.
To me, that would be a kind of blunt force trauma.
You can find out so much more about an individual through science, which may help identify them.
Because for each unidentified body, there's a family whose loved one has disappeared without trace.
Just to know that there's a place where he is. And at the moment, we don't know where he is.
I can get to say my goodbyes to my dad.
This is almost the point where the body was found floating on the sea.
German police detective Carsten Bettels is working with Dave Grimstead, head of Locate International, on a case that dates back almost 30 years. It's a suspected murder.
It was the 11th of July, 1994. It was a federal police vessel. They saw the body by chance, so the captain decided to put him on the boat.
It must have been really difficult to get the body out of the sea.
Yes, but they had some equipment, for example, nets.
And what were their initial thoughts?
They saw it was a very large man. They recognized that he might have been underwater for several weeks or months, floated by the waves and by the wind. They also saw injuries on the body, on the head and on the breast. They also wonder about some weights on the belt. They saw that something was not right with this man.
Despite a thorough investigation, the German police couldn't identify the man.
Is it unusual to find an unidentified body in the North Sea?
I know that the captain, although he's an old man now, this was the only case where he found a dead body in the sea.
The German police have now reopened the investigation. They hope that modern forensic techniques can finally unlock the case.
In diesem internationalen Cold Case Analyseprojekt, wir haben hier einen unbekannten Toten.
Carsten runs the police academy in Lower Saxony. The cold case unit here reinvestigates unsolved mysteries on the police files.
Dieser Mann hat eine Identität. Und diese Identität kennen wir nicht. Er liegt beerdigt, anonym beerdigt, da, wo er eigentlich gar nicht hingehört und wo ihn auch Verwandte nicht besuchen können. Und alleine dafür lohnt es sich schon, zu versuchen, die Identität dieses Mannes jetzt festzustellen, um auch seinen Angehörigen eine Möglichkeit zu geben, einen Ort zu finden, an dem sie auch trauern können.
So, tell me a little bit more about the case. What were the initial findings from recovery of the body?
Im Juli 1994, es wurde eine Obduktion veranlasst. Die Kopfverletzungen und auch die Verletzungen im Brustbereich waren mit stumpfer Gewalt ausgeführt. Und dann im Nachhinein natürlich, wir haben eine Situation einer Beschwerung eines Leichnams, damit er nach unten gezogen wird im Wasser.
So that's indicating it might be a murder.
Ja, was will ich denn noch mehr für den Anfangsverdacht einer Straftat, eines Tötungsdelikts haben? Natürlich auf der anderen Seite kann man die genauen Umstände des Todes ja erst dann feststellen, wenn man die Identität einer Person ermittelt hat.
So if one of the hypotheses is that this is a murder, that means that there is a suspect that's not been identified, that is currently free.
Ja, und das soll jeder, der hier Verantwortung trägt für die Tötung dieses Mannes, wissen, dass irgendwann auch die Polizei morgens vor seiner Tür stehen kann und klingelt.
Tell me about his physical characteristics. What stood out about North Sea Man?
Also man kann auf jeden Fall sagen, dass der Mann ja sehr groß war. Mit einer Größe von 1,97 ist er ja schon doch deutlich größer als vielleicht so der Durchschnitt der Menschen. Und er hatte auch insgesamt, war er sehr schlank und sportlich und das ist ja auch schon ein sehr auffälliges Merkmal.
1,97 m, nearly 6'6", would put the man in the tallest 1% of the population. Photographs of the skull were used to make an image of what North Sea Man might have looked like.
Der verantwortliche Ermittler hatte sich an das FBI in Washington in den Vereinigten Staaten gewandt und darum gebeten, eine Gesichtsweichteilrekonstruktion quasi aus dem Schädel zu fertigen. Und dem ist man nachgekommen. Man hat damals eine entsprechende Zeichnung angefertigt.
The early investigation suggested a strong British link.
Eine wichtige Spur. Es gibt eigentlich fast kaum ein Bekleidungsstück an dem Leichnam, was keinen Bezug nach Großbritannien hatte. Zum Beispiel hier ein Label mit Marks & Spencer.
And we can see the shirt and the tie. From what you're saying, the clothes are really important in terms of trying to help understand who the North Sea man is, understand them as a person and where they might have come from.
Carsten has asked Dave and his team to investigate the British end of the case.
This case is a real challenge. 1994, this has been unsolved for decades. This is a murder. There's somebody who's escaped justice, somebody who is responsible for that murder. Any case that remains unsolved, particularly ones where you've not found an answer at all in the investigation, they all stay with you. You really get to understand the trauma that's caused by that not knowing. It's really those cases that inspires me to find a way to help.
North Sea man's distinctive clothing is the place to start. And Dave knows just the person who might be able to help.
My name's Amber Butchart. I am a forensic garment analyst. For any cases where unidentified remains are found, which might include clothing or textiles, I could be brought in to do analysis, really just to glean any kind of clues or information that could help with the wider case itself. So immediately, although this man was found near Germany, we have a very strong link to Britain in terms of the clothing. So we've got these underpants, Marks & Spencer. We also have a tie from Marks & Spencer. Relatively smart appearance, white shirt. The shirt and the tie itself is the classic marker of someone who works in an office. We've contacted the archive at Marks & Spencer, and they have let us know that these particular numbers, this 060 configuration on the label for the tie, means that this particular model was made in mid-1990 and was likely in stores for about a year. So that is really consistent with the time frame that we're looking at. What is interesting, I think especially interesting, is the shoes. Church's brand, made in England, we're really considering a sort of luxury product here. And we can infer from this, middle-class socio-economic background.
The upmarket shoes aren't the only evidence in this case connected to footwear.
I mean, North Sea man was weighed down by these iron weights. It's not something I've come across before.
Okay, so these are shoe lasts, and therefore specifically making shoes or for repairing shoes. Now, shoe lasts, I think, are something that today maybe not too many people are really familiar with shoe lasts. So how, in conjunction with the body, were these shoe lasts found?
They were inside the socks that were then tied to the belt.
This is not an accidental configuration, is it? This is very deliberate. I think that is a really interesting and really essential line of investigation. So we have not only the clothing and accessories found on North Sea man himself, but there's also the very real possibility these shoe lasts have actually been used in the murder of this person, if we're looking at a murder case. I haven't come across people that have shoe lasts outside of people working in the shoe industry. It would be interesting to know if that was also the case 30 years ago. So there's kind of double intrigue. It's definitely something that requires further investigation.
Almost 30 years ago, an unidentified body was found floating in the North Sea. Forensic expert Amber Butchart is investigating the clothing the man was found in. In particular, his expensive English shoes.
So we've arrived in Northampton, the home of shoemaking in Britain, and we're here to visit the museum here and to meet the curator, Rebecca Shawcross, who is one of the country's foremost experts in shoes, to find out what insight she can give us into these churches' shoes. Quite an old British brand, now owned by Prada, so now very clearly situated within the luxury market. Now, how many shoes do you have in the collection?
Oh, about 15,000 pairs of shoes. The entire collection is probably 70,000, 80,000 items.
Wow.
All relating to the making of shoes, and then all the sort of associated subjects as well.
So we're considering these churches. They're very expensive shoes to buy now, aren't they?
They are indeed, yes. I mean, a sort of similar style today is £700 to £800.
It's quite a lot.
So even back in the sort of 1980s, 1990s in particular, they still would have been expensive items. So obviously churches have been going for a very long time, since 1873. They make really durable, particularly like high-end men's shoes. Shoes that are meant to last, really.
And it's traditional shoemaking, isn't it? It's
Yes.
not what you would get in, you know, fast fashion,
No.
high street stores. It's like the antithesis of
No, most
that.
definitely.
These are the sort of shoes that you spend a lot of money on, but they last, and you wear them and wear them and wear them.
Yes. The shoes obviously had a lot of wear, and you can see as well that they've been repaired. So they have a Phillips sticker sole on the sole. You could have gone into your sort of cobbler on the high street and he would have attached this Phillips sticker sole, or you could do it at home. So you get your little packet of 2 with some glue, and then you would just stick them on the sole to prevent more wear.
Rebecca may also know more about the heavy weights that were attached to the man's belt, which would have made sure that his body sank.
These shoe lasts were found with the body. Now, shoe lasts like this, I don't think that this is something that just like everybody has around the house.
No, not every, certainly they're not overly common. So this is your traditional wood one, what a shoe is made on. So all the shoe factories in Northampton still have like racks and racks and racks of these.
Okay, so these are lasts for making shoes on.
Yeah.
And so I guess this one with the slot in
yes,
the heel
does
is
look.
most similar. I mean,
yes,
not by any means exactly the same, but is most similar, isn't it? Can I try the weight
Yes, you
of...
can. They are really quite heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they are
I mean, if you
hefty.
wanted to weight something down, that would certainly do the job.
Definitely.
In which case, if we are looking at a murder case, it seems that maybe the murderer, do you think, could have potentially had some connection with the shoe trade?
To have a, you know, 2 heavy sort of repairers' lasts on hand, it's odd that they are just, you know, hanging around for somebody to use. It's not like, you know, picking up a kitchen knife, you know, which is obviously common to, you know, almost all households.
Oof. Ooh. I think it's really interesting that Rebecca had kind of arrived at the same hypothesis as I had regarding the shoe lasts. And so this idea that it was the perpetrator, if there was a perpetrator, but assuming there was, who was maybe somehow involved in the shoe industry, that makes these lasts really important to find out more about, I think.
While Amber works on a possible link to the shoe industry, Dave focuses on how North Sea Man died. He's in Dublin to visit forensic anthropologist René Gapert.
So here are now photographs of the body inside the mortuary.
René has gone through the autopsy photos and reports from 1994.
So from what you're seeing at the moment in the images, any ideas around how long the body might have been in the water?
There is severe decomposition, I would say under 2 months maybe in water. So now what they did is try to find out the age at death of that person. They are sending the teeth to the Institute of Human Genetics and Anthropology at the University of Freiburg. And there they are using a method called tooth cement annulation. It's almost like tree rings. These rings are laid down in the enamel. And there they find that the age at death of this person was somewhere between 45 and 50 years, which points to a birth year for the person of 1944, 1945. Here now a picture of the body from the left side, and the view that we see here, show here on this model, from the right side towards the left side. Inside we can see this serrated rib fracture here. Several of the ribs here on the left side that have fractures. The damage looks like it occurred along this row of ribs, and it's not multiple fractures in each rib, it's multiple fractures in a series of ribs. So it's just one fracture in each of the ribs here on this side. Also interesting that it occurred on the left side, but it doesn't look like the arm was involved in it as well.
Okay.
So we're looking into the skull. What we can see here is very dark discoloration, which is suggestive of an intracranial bleed. Now we have a view into the skull, and there we can clearly see there are fracture lines running.
Okay.
So the injury that we see, it's situated on the outside here, and that would be an area in the skull model that's running around here on the left side.
So in your experience, what's that telling us about that injury?
So that to me is a blunt force impact onto the side of the head, on the left side.
Okay.
And that's interesting to see because we also have the trauma on the left ribs, on the left side of the ribs.
Yeah. It's quite a circular fracture. Does that tell you anything in terms of what the blunt force might have been?
It's because it curves around here slightly, but the point of impact is probably around here. It doesn't look like a signature break. There's nothing that left a signature like a hammer or another object that has very sharp defined edges.
Okay, so having seen the pathology report and gone through the images in some detail now, what would be your opinion based on your experience?
There is clear evidence visible on the photographs that show the blunt force injury to the left side of the body. But I think it's difficult to say if it was some violent act that caused it or if it was something that happened to the body on the way into the water. Looking at, of course, the shoe lasts that were tied tightly around the body. Again, there's a possibility here that maybe someone wanted to weigh down the body, make sure it doesn't come up. But I've also seen cases where people who self-harm, who go to that length, they know if they enter the water, they might struggle or they want to, in the last moment, save themselves. And to be absolutely sure that this is not the case, they weigh themselves down with different means.
René thinks the man could have taken his own life by tying the weights to himself and jumping into the sea, sustaining the injuries as he fell.
With a case like this, we don't know if this man was murdered or whether it was suicide. And I've seen cases where a murder's been made to look like a suicide. So it's really important to keep an open mind.
Every aspect of the case is surrounded in mystery, even how this man died. The best route to identifying him could be to build a picture of his life, his job, and where he may have come from. The team have a profile of the man found floating in the North Sea. He was unusually tall, nearly 6'6". He was between 45 and 50 years old. He had fractures to his ribs and skull. Most intriguingly, he had expensive shoes that had been repaired, and his body was weighted down with heavy iron shoe lasts. Amber is investigating whether the man had any connection to the shoe repair trade.
George.
Hi.
She's come to meet George Stavro, a traditional cobbler in North London.
So you've been here quite a while, is that right? Is that fair to say?
1976, I was 18 when I took over the shop. At the time, there was an old gentleman here who, well, I thought he was old at the time, he was 40. So we took it on, and I've been here 46 years nearly. It feels like I've been doing it all my life.
And you have quite a long relationship with churches.
And we're the authorised repairer for churches' shoes.
Yeah. Wow.
We specialise in bespoke repairing, so we can take a shoe apart and rebuild it. This is the sort of thing that we get. At the moment, it looks like just a piece of leather, but eventually when we're going to reline it, we're going to put a new insole in it, we're going to re-welt it, put the sole on it, and then it'll be a shoe again.
It's incredibly skilled work, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amber wants to know whether the repairs carried out on the man's shoes were done by a professional.
So this is a picture of the kind of church's shoe that we're looking at. What's really interesting about these shoes is that they have been repaired.
Well, this is a Phillips stick-on sole done by a shoe repairer, probably a local shoe repairer that he's gone to.
OK, that's interesting, because that's something we were wondering. As soon as Rebecca mentioned that this is a stick-on sole that can be used at home, it sort of threw a different kind of light onto the sort of person we're potentially looking for.
Done by somebody at home, you probably wouldn't see such a correct position of the sole, because it's quite to the edge and the heel as well, because that's been nailed on and the nails have been punched in, so it wouldn't be something that you would do at home.
George thinks these shoes have been professionally repaired, but his expert eye has noticed something else about the workmanship.
I thought it would look quite clumsy, to be honest, on that shoe. If I was to repair something like this with a stick-on sole, I would put something fine, so you'd hardly notice it's on there.
Right.
And it doesn't change the feel of it. You still have the flexibility. That to me looks quite thick and clumsy.
Yeah.
I would sack that guy if he worked for me.
Now, this case, the body was found with 2 metal shoe lasts.
These lasts, they're shoe repairers' lasts. They're a cobbler's last. They're men's. I'm pretty sure they're men's, because ladies, especially in those days, would have a higher heel, and you've got a left and a right. Nowadays, a lot of shoe repairers use these lasts where you can put a left foot or a right foot on there. So I haven't seen these for years. They go onto a circular pin which has a rectangular top to it which fits into here, and they would have different sizes. Actually, when I took over the shop, the old boy used to use these, and they used to annoy me, because after a while, the more you work with it, this becomes quite loose on the pin. So over time, when you're moving the last around, it starts to wear away. Right. So after a while, it falls off quite easily, but these have hardly been used. You can see the slit in here, still quite new.
That's really interesting, because they're not new lasts. They have the initials AJK on them. They're a company in Bristol, and they're maybe from the sort of 20s or 30s.
Okay.
So by the time we come across them in 1994, they're pretty old. So
yes, but hardly used.
But hardly used.
He wasn't a very busy shoe repairer.
Would these have been something that you would only find in a cobbler's in the 90s? Is this something that people might have at home, do you think?
No, this is I think is definitely used by a professional shoe repairer.
And so if we were going to try and find someone that was repairing shoes in the 90s, assuming there are these links to the shoe repair world.
In the old days, there was a lot of shoe repairers. 50s and 60s, I think there was more shoe repairers in those days.
Right.
But nowadays, people don't repair shoes like we do today. There's very few of us around.
Absolutely invaluable contribution from George. It does seem like this is someone who was involved with the repairing of shoes.
Was North Sea Man a cobbler? Or maybe he was murdered by a cobbler? With that in mind, Amber needs to approach the small community of British cobblers to see if anyone remembers him. Dave remains focused on the body. Now he's trying to find out where the man might have come from.
We've seen the place where North Sea man was found in the water, but that could be completely different from where he entered the water, which for us is, as investigators, is really important.
He's in Lowestoft to meet another of Locate's network of experts.
My name's John Rees and I'm a forensic oceanographer. Forensic oceanography is the prediction and the tracking of bodies in the marine environment. Welcome to the CFAS laboratory. This is where we set up equipment that goes out to sea. We've got an ADCP around. We're actually funded to work on oil spill response around the UK. So we've got sophisticated models that can actually predict where the oil is going to come ashore. This is one of our key instruments, one of the water samplers, and you can see all the instrumentation driven by satellite communication.
So you must be collecting a massive amount of data.
Absolutely. And so we started to think a bit more laterally about how can we use these models in a different situation.
From the autopsy, it's estimated that the man could have been in the water for up to 2 months. Based on this, John has constructed a computer model to try and predict where he would have entered the sea.
So I've extracted the data from some big international databases of the currents and the winds from the time in 1994 of the case.
What are the factors that affect how you do your modelling?
So one of the key factors is the buoyancy associated with the missing person. The shoe lasts are really critical because they will be holding the body onto the seabed. They are considerably heavier than the buoyancy that a body can create.
Yeah.
So it's very slow moving in this situation as it got taken by the tide. So this is the model. The location where it was found is where that cross is there in the center of the map. And now if I start the model now, you can see the particles moving around these little black dots that are moving with the tide, so they're moving backwards on the flood and ebb tide. The way that I actually do the modelling is I actually put in 5,000 points to represent the body. And you can see this black blob is getting bigger and bigger, so the uncertainty in the model is adding to the potential location that the body has come from. So as time goes through, and we're approximately halfway through the 30-day run that I've done here, this is 12 days, as you can see that the flock of particles moves in that southwesterly direction. So you can see now we're approximately 18 days into the model, and it's starting to head towards the Dutch islands, the Frisian Islands. So, as a group, they're called the Frisian Islands. But it's not showing any indications of coming ashore or starting from the shoreline, I should say. Now we're starting to come towards the end of the run, and so it looks like it's going to be somewhere around the Dutch islands is where he could have come from.
Because of the sheer volume of data, the model only goes back 30 days. But Dave is keen to know what happens if they work back as far as 2 months.
Extrapolating from your experience of this area and what you've got on the modelling, can you tell us what kind of direction that you think that's going to be heading in?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would expect if you were to extrapolate backwards another 30 days is that it would be from the site more in the west, above Texel Island, the first island in the chain. This is on a typical transport pathway from the UK to the Dutch coastline.
North Sea man almost certainly fell into the sea from a boat, right in the middle of a busy shipping route.
When you look at the map here, you can see how busy that waterway is. It could be fishing vessels, it could be passenger ferries, it could even be oil rigs. So there's just so many different places where somebody could get lost at sea. So that now needs to be researched fully so that we can see where people have been lost from ships and begin to track that back to see whether any of those have the potential to be North Sea man. So that's a huge research task for the team.
The investigation to identify the man found in the North Sea has now been going on for over a year. Dave is still working closely with the German police. And there's news on some test results.
Carsten, I understand there's some results from the isotope analysis.
Yes, it was a very surprising result for us. And they shed a totally different light on the origin of our unidentified victim of the North Sea.
Isotope analysis is a cutting-edge forensic technique. It involves looking at microscopic traces of elements like lead and strontium in the body. This can provide clues about where in the world a person grew up.
When you look over all results, it is very likely that the man came from Australia. And so this is very, very interesting and surprising for us all.
You could see maybe it's somebody who's travelled from Australia to the UK, lost touch with their family, and nobody's reported them missing. So are the police uploading the DNA from the profile to the Australian databases?
Yes, they contacted Interpol and asked the Australian police to support in this case. We'll see next week, I think, in the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Good to speak to you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, Dave.
I mean, it is a real surprise to get the Australia connection for somebody who has drifted away perhaps from their family or friends or work. And that big distance between Australia and the UK might explain some of that lost contact.
The investigation is widening. The connection to the shoe trade, the examination of shipping records, and now the potential link to Australia. With so many leads to follow, Dave and Amber take stock.
I mean, this investigation has been going for some time. There's some intensive research that's been conducted. So the police in Germany have been able to upload the DNA into the Australian database, and it's been negative. There's been no match against that DNA database.
Well, we've been looking into the origin of the shoe lasts. So we also actually reached out to the cobbling community to see if we could reach anyone who could give us any information about these links to shoe repair, the footwear trade in general. And so far, unfortunately, nothing.
The team have been working on researching all the missing persons databases across in the UK and in Europe. They started looking at the number of accidents at sea, people who have been lost overboard, shipping disasters. There were some really promising leads in terms of the investigation that we all thought at that point might be a good match, but they've been ruled out.
I feel like we've got so much information now about North Sea Man, and there's also such a kind of huge geography that we're covering. If there's the likelihood he grew up in Australia, we've got the German police, the obvious UK connections as well. There are so many people we could potentially be reaching out to. I feel like it's time to take everything we've got and just get it out to a much broader public, just to let everyone know and see if anybody can come forward with any information that can help us to identify North Sea Man.
It's such an important case. I mean, this is a murder investigation. So we've got a man with traumatic injuries where there's no explanation for those injuries and can't rule out other options like suicide. Let's get this out into the media and let's get this out into the right places where we might be able to find that one person who might have that information about who North Sea Man is. That might help us find the answers as to what happened to North Sea Man on that day.
The most important part of a public appeal is a lifelike picture. The image produced by the FBI in the 1990s is very out of date. Modern forensic techniques can produce something much more realistic. In Dundee, Dr. Toby Holton is an anthropologist who specialises in facial reconstructions.
Okay, so what we have on the screen here is a facial approximation that was produced in the late 90s by the FBI for the German police. So it's very rough. They would have had a photograph of the skull. They had the tissue depth data already applied onto the skull through pegs. The lips, for instance, at that time, they would have roughly estimated lip height according to the enamel. And they would have basically used tracing film overlays in order to sketch the development of the face and then produce that in a final sketched image. With the advancement in technology, we can create a face that looks more realistic. You can take various bony measurements, enter those measurements into the equations that we now apply, and then it gives you a calculated reference to what the soft tissue feature is supposed to be. We can superimpose certain textural details from a photo bank of actual faces, superimpose those into the reconstructed image of the face. And I think this has been a good development from the first example that was generated by the FBI in the 90s. It will hopefully be a bit more useful in terms of how people engage and recognize certain elements of the face, as well as the clothing that has been applied as well.
With a new, more realistic picture, the media campaign begins.
We know that national newspapers have great traction. They've got a great online presence these days. Here's the latest article from The Guardian, which covers the case in depth. There's another article here from the Daily Mirror. And then it's the responsibility of the team to make sure that that news story gets out in front of as many people as we can, to place in Facebook groups, to share amongst friends on social media.
Welcome to Friday's show. We're coming to you live from our studios in Cardiff.
They have never been able to identify him, so the charity Locate International have picked up the case and are asking for your help in their investigation.
So now it's about appealing to the public. And there's some really unusual things about this case, particularly with his height and his clothing.
So this is Cutting Edge magazine. This is a trade magazine for shoe repairers in the UK. There's about 4,000 subscribers, so we're really hoping we might be able to reach into the cobbling community.
So we've got expensive shoes with a repair that wasn't that great.
So I currently have about 50,000 followers on Instagram. A lot of the people that follow me are interested in the history of clothing.
So we've created a campaign page called A Tall Mystery, which encourages people to come forward, submit information on the website.
Do you have any clues as to who this man might be?
The media appeal has thrown up several leads, but all of them have proved to be dead ends. It's frustrating for everyone involved. North Sea Man is proving to be one of the toughest cases Locate International has taken on. Dave and Amber need to reach a wider audience to help crack the case. To get advice, they're visiting another of their network of experts.
My name's Fiona Gabbett. I'm a Professor of Psychology here at Goldsmiths, University of London. I'm also Director of the cold case investigation team that we have.
All the work that's been done so far has failed to find a name.
So we use our knowledge to help people remember and report information that might be useful to help provide leads or evidence that hopefully will help solve a cold case. Your challenge is that it happened a long time ago.
Fiona and her team have developed psychological techniques to help people recover forgotten memories.
I think our advice is really to create an engaging appeal that grabs people's attention, maybe because of the specifics of the case, and to provide them with the retrieval cues to take them back to that time in 1994. To activate your memory of where you were and who you knew at that time.
You might have been at a concert, or you might have remembered a favourite film.
What was number one for the longest period of time?
Or just world events.
because memory is associative, the more they sit themselves and think, well, where was I living at the time or working at the time? It might well be that along with the more unique cues about what the man looked like, they might start thinking, oh, well, maybe I had a neighbour that matched that description, or maybe he reminded me of a teacher at the time or somebody who worked nearby.
That's interesting as well, because I feel like there's quite a big nostalgia for the 1990s at the moment. So you could kind of use that, couldn't you? You could use the sort of popular interest in the decade, I guess.
Yeah, then they go down the rabbit hole of 1994, so they're really, really engaging.
You could be quite creative on how to engage members of the public, get them to enjoy trying to help you solve this. And even if they don't know who the person is, they can help by sharing. And of course, if they share and other people share, then if you're lucky, it will reach a wider and wider and wider audience, and someone somewhere must know who this person is.
Now, Dave and Amber can put this advice into practice and film their new appeal video.
Okay, when you're ready.
In July 1994, the body of a man was pulled out of the North Sea near Germany. We need your help to identify him.
His clothes suggest he was based in the UK.
It may help jog your memory if you think back to that time in your life. What were you doing in the spring of 1994?
It was the time Love Is All Around was in the charts for 15 weeks. And a peace deal was signed in Northern Ireland.
For the first time in nearly 2 decades, soldiers walked the Falls Road with no need to fear the IRA.
We have forgotten our differences. We are now busy healing the wounds of the past.
North Sea man may have grown up in Australia. We think this man was around 50 years old, so he would have been around 80 now. We know he was tall, possibly as tall as 6'6". He's someone who would have really stood out.
When he was found, he was wearing expensive shoes that had been repaired. He was also weighed down with shoe lasts. Do you know anyone who worked in the shoe repair business around this time?
He was found in the water near Germany, but we think he drifted from the west. This is on a busy shipping route between the UK and Europe. Did you or anyone you know work or travel on the ferries and see anything unusual?
Is there anyone from your family who went missing around this time? Someone who resembles the man in this picture?
If you have any information, go to the Locate International website below and tell us what you know.
Even if you don't have any information, someone you know might.
Find this appeal on social media, share the clip and help us to solve the case.
You might be able to help a family that's been looking for their missing loved one for nearly 30 years.
Help us work out, who is North Sea Man?
Great, thank you very much.
The team will now wait for someone to come forward with information. Meanwhile, the investigation goes on.
For us, the search continues. You imagine that if somebody goes missing from your life, that sense of not knowing what happened leads to a huge amount of trauma for families. So we continue that search, trying to find those answers and trying to find a name for unidentified people.